Welcome to B2B in the Black's Digital Fireside Chats. I'm your host, Khalow, CEO of BusinessOnline, a performance-driven digital marketing agency. But way more important, I'm the co-founder of this amazing group and this amazing movement we call B2B in the Black. I'd like to introduce our esteemed B2B luminaries from a company called Conversica, which is a leader in providing intelligent virtual assistants, helping to organize and attract, acquire, and grow customers at scale. We have first Mike Bergines, Vice President of Finance, and his co-partner in crime, Rashmi, Vittal, the CMO of Conversica. Rashmi and Mike, welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Fantastic. So the title of today's session, which I think is so apropos, is about communication, right? Finance is from Mars, marketing is from Venus. I love it. How do we get on the same page and how do we speak the same language through the lens of data and performance, right? And how do we drive that throughout the entire organization? And I love how you broke this down, Rashmi and Mike, formal communication, informal communication, and open communication. And because my wife is a communications expert, we talked about this, and she also will be dialing into this event as well. But here we are, modern finance and marketing need to align, right? And they need to drive reliable data-driven decisions so they can be well-informed to take on all of the crazy variability in business today. However, these groups don't necessarily speak the same language, right? And that can be very problematic. So, today's session is going to be around how we establish that common language, which I think is so critical because we often talk over each other, and how we drive this data-driven and analytics environment that is so critical to business today. So with that, let's open the discussion to the experts. So, I think the first question is, let's just start at the basics. What does data mean to you? And maybe Mike, let's start in your direction, and we'll start there.
Sure. So I think there's really three forms of data for me. Obviously, numbers as a finance person is the main form of data, and that data goes into financial statements and budgets and the like. And then the other one is what I would call analytical data that we use to measure and understand and plan so that those financial numbers, if we're forecasting, come as close to reality as we can. And to make business decisions, whether it's ROI, whether it's how to prioritize one thing over the other. And then the third is unstructured data, information that we need to use, and of course marketing needs to use to make decisions where numbers and pure analytics is not easily done, or the data set isn't such that you can easily do that and point to the right answer. So that's the way I think about it.
How about you, Rashmi?
Yeah, for marketing and for marketing leaders, for me, data is really a compass. It helps me understand whether I'm getting towards my North Star or not. It helps me say, are you heading in the right direction? What's working? What's not? It's really about using the data and then the analytics on top of it to really see what are the trends, what are the patterns, what are the outliers, and really you go in like any good experiment. Sometimes you could go in with hopefully what is a strong hypothesis, but you need to prove it out. And the data is the very thing that helps you prove that out.
And let me ask you this, and I'd love to just go one layer deep, Rashmi. And when you work with folks on the creative side, whether you're working with an agency or an internal creative team, how often are they coming to you with ideas in terms of campaigns and messaging that is truly data-driven? And it's not an idea backed by data, because you can see that, right? Like where someone has this beautiful idea and then they go and find the statistics and stats to support the idea, versus the opposite, which is like you're seeing the data, some sort of insight is surfaced, and then creative and campaigns are driven from there. How do you think about that? And are you seeing that within your own organization?
Yeah, absolutely. I think even now, I call the era that we're in right now AC after COVID. There's BC before COVID and how we operated, and then AC after COVID. And so, it's like now more than ever. Look, your channels are digital channels. You're investing in it a lot more. We're putting a lot more dollars into programmatic spend. And so we actually happen to use an agency, and that agency is very data driven. So we open our calls, our touch point calls, with how are things running? Like, how did these campaigns run? What are these search terms? How are they doing? What's your cost? What's your return? We see that this ebook campaign is not doing as well as this other ebook campaign. And so we dissect what that is, but the data is our compass in helping us see it. So very important for me. I am always one that says, start me off with whatever your objectives and goals are. Show me the data that's saying how we're heading towards those objectives and goals, and then let's get into the tactics of like what's working and what's not, and have that kind of dialogue. For me, if people start at that kind of on the ground floor and what's working, what's not, without the stuff in the beginning, it's hard to hold my attention.
That's great. Yeah, no, that's the new world of a CMO, right? Like you got to talk about performance and data first. And Mike, this one's back to you. As a finance leader within Conversica, how should someone communicate with you from the lens of data? To the point I was just making with Rashmi is like, it can be used and manipulated in many ways. What's best? When do you see it really working well with you in the finance organization?
Right. Well, really for me, I started the same place Rashmi does. Is like, what's the problem we're trying to solve? So many times you can get into the trees and not see the forest. Look at all this data. Look at, how we can crunch this data. And, what I'll do in a situation like that is, so why should I care? If people are not telling me that this data is in service of figuring out this business problem, it's really not helpful. A lot of times, and in this world where you've got people are so time constrained and so much data to look at, really, whether you're a finance person or an analytics person, it's really easy to get lost in it. It's almost like surfing the web, right? Oh, that's interesting. And then in the end, you say, okay, but we haven't solved the problem. So if somebody comes to me and says, if they set it up correctly, I'm all in. If they don't set it up correctly, I tend to tune out. And that setup is, here's the problem we're solving. Here's the data we're using and why we're using it. And here's what the data is telling us. If you tell me that, you're going to be very successful with me. Anything other than that, we're going to have to go back to the drawing board.
And that makes a lot of sense. I mean, even Mike, as we've been talking and interacting with one another, I mean, in how we can jointly work together to drive to our business objectives, and what's marketing's contributions to that, and how is finance? I look at finance as being a key stakeholder, obviously, in the outcomes, but also a support mechanism in helping marketing be able to achieve the goals that we want to achieve, right? And so that support between kind of modeling out the business, support between modeling out kind of whether it's budgets and spend and desired outcomes over a period of time. To me, it's really important that marketing and finance can get aligned and then speak the same language. But it is a learning curve, and because finance is so used to looking at something in a certain way, and marketing is so used to learning about thinking about it in a different way. And it's like, okay, how can we find that bridge? How can we find how can we bridge that gap?
And I would point out that the conversations marketing and finance have today are dramatically different than they were 10 years ago or 15 years ago, for that very reason. There's so much data out there now. I mean, Google and Facebook and all these companies that allow marketers to invest and see the return on their investment and optimize is why those companies are worth multi-billions of dollars. And so the conversation I would have had with my counterpart before those companies is very different. And, Rashmi is a great example of somebody who not only is really good with data, but loves the data and wants to make decisions based on data. That's, and every CMO is different though. And we do ultimately end up talking about things that we can't measure in the moment and taking what Rashmi likes to call the leap of faith. And I say, okay, I'm cool with a leap of faith, but I'm cool with a leap of faith until we start getting data on it, and then we can iterate, right? Yeah. So that's one of the ways we bridge, and that language is bridged. Say, yeah, I get it. We can't know that, but hopefully, given all the great tools we have, we'll learn something immediately from it, and then and as long as we iterate, I'm with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's a. Go ahead, Rashmi.
No, I was going to say, look, I mean, I think like anything else, whenever you lay down a hypothesis, there's got to be some base level of assumptions, right? And if you're taking a leap of faith, that leap of faith is a hypothesis. And it should come with a series of assumptions, and those assumptions should be understood along with the thesis statement that you're laying out, right? And so if you can, as you're starting to gather the data, to Mike's point, if you can either verify, validate, or reject any one of your assumptions, right, then that's golden, right? Because that's only going to then feed into, okay, do we change the hypothesis? Has it is it working or is it not? And in everything, and I know it may sound very like an experiment I'm laying out, but that is rather what it is. I mean, everything can be an experiment, and if you have the right thesis statement or a thesis statement with assumptions, and then you start having data flow in, you can start getting a better sense of what's reality.
I think it's pretty clear today. Life, is an experiment, right? Like there's no givens, in today's world, right? Whether it be business, politics, environment, you name it. So I wholeheartedly agree with that. And I want to touch on, the notion of you guys have talked about, thesis statements and then the data and essentially, what would most likely drive into this notion of measurement and KPIs. But you said something, Rashmi, early on, that I'd love to just rewind for a second, because there's this grand conversation around the conversation, right? How do the two of you, and how did it start? How did you build that relationship? How did you build that trust? How did you build that common vernacular or lexicon of what's important to Mike in terms of what he needs to measure to feel comfortable enough to take that leap of faith with you, Rashmi, as you begin to bring programs forward? Some you can prove direct correlation. Some there is going to be that leap of faith. What did it look like? Was there a turning point, a moment? Did you have, is over a number of lunches? How did that happen?
Yeah, I think, well, my perspective, this is my perspective. It'll be interesting to hear Mike's, but, actually Mike really came forward, having joined the company after I did. He really came forward and he said, look, I'm the type of finance leader that I really want to establish a really strong, good working relationship with my line of business leaders. And I want to learn, I want to know, and you're the expert in your field in marketing, and I'm the expert in finance, and help me understand your world. And so we're here to support you. I am always tickled pink to hear a finance leader say things like, we're here to support you, we're not here to block you, right? Because oftentimes how people can view the relationship, regardless of what line of business you're in, I'll take marketing since that's where my experience is when you start working with a finance leader, you get the sense immediately that everything they're saying is all about blocking your ability to move forward. They're obstructionists. And so with Mike, it was quite the opposite. It was all like, help me understand how we can partner together so that you can achieve what it is you need to achieve. And to me, that's a great place to start a relationship.
And Mike, I'll turn over to you in a second, but it's funny. I had this whole diatribe around how good finance is at giving you smart reasons to say no. Like, they're really good at saying, let me tell you why the answer is no. And everyone kind of sits back and says, well, crap, how do I argue with that? And the reverse is happening in Conversica with obviously with your relationship with Mike, which is, it seems as though he sees, marketing as a path to drive growth and business goals. So Mike, where was that born from? Did you have an experience? Are you just a unique finance beast, right? And you're a different guy? Where did you learn that?
Well, I would like to think
approach?
I'm not a unique finance beast, but I am an entrepreneur. I've started a company before, so I've sat on Rashmi's side of the table. And I would say, just as a form of a background, is I came from a marketing, working with a marketing leader in the past, where I would say things to her like, just because you haven't created a budget doesn't mean you don't have one. So to be able to sit down with Rashmi and have her be so facile and desire to work with numbers and get to the bottom line and all that. I mean, she won me over at that point. You can't not say you don't want to support somebody who wants to go about it in a way that makes sense to you. I mean, that would be silly. I mean, we're not here to not take risk. If we're here not to take risk, we can all go home and buy CDs. I mean, I want us to take risk, and I want us to take smart risk. And I realize that if I'm working with a CMO who knows numbers, knows how to analyze things, then I'm way ahead of the game. So let's give her what she needs.
And how much of that has to be positioned in your terms? Like if you're looking at free cash flows, if you're looking at profitability versus growth, CAC, like, how sophisticated does that language need to be outside of her world, which is performance and ROI or return on ad spend and those types of things, which are data driven and talk to finance to a degree, but there's a whole nother level that some folks are able to deliver. And I guess what point does that, ring true to you? Like,
I really try not to complicate things and confuse things with Rashmi or my business partners. It's like they don't need to know all the pieces of the balance sheet and how they work together and all that good stuff. What I'm simply saying to her is, what would you like to do and why, and how does that come out on the other end as far as success for the company? I think that sometimes we struggle, which is totally natural, when in the end, regardless of our conversation and understanding of what she wants to do and having that debate and agreeing on something, in the end, and this is not terribly fair, but it's just my world, I have to put numbers down on a sheet that I can stand behind and I have to explain to people. So where it's difficult to put numbers on some things, and it always is, she will probably feel like I'm nagging her when I'm telling her, okay, so how do I create numbers related to that? Or how can I measure this if it's a combination of this thing and that thing? And she's probably shaking her head, but I hope she knows that the only reason I'm not asking that to be difficult, at the end, I need to be able to put a number down. And the unfair thing to finance people is you don't get to put ranges down in a budget. You have to put down a number.
Right.
You don't get to say, well, it could be this versus this. I mean, our CEO would drop kick me out of the room if I said that. That's just not the way. That's just not the way you talk about finance, and that puts a pressure on me that doesn't always naturally reconcile with reality or the way Rashmi's thinking. That's the only time we need to kind of go a few rounds.
Sure. Rashmi, I saw you smiling a couple times throughout. Why were you smiling?
I think, look, like anything in marketing, you have to really be flexible, nimble, and adaptable to the market dynamics. And so something that I may have put down in a spreadsheet, to get, board approval on through finance like 6 months ago may change. Right. And it may not hold true. Shoot, that couldn't have been more true come, March 11th for everybody. Right. Like we literally just got, I felt like we just got our board plan approved for the year and then, kind of wipe it right away and kind of start over, hit reset. And so, but that being aside, if there's something that I see happening in the market that we need to take advantage of and we need to jump on, I need that flexibility to be able to do it. So for me, having that, so I kind of bake into my own budget and my operating model, that kind of cushion and flexibility, so I can have funds at accessible that I could go do that with. And so, but one of the things too, I remember, when I'll say, in terms of language, even for, there has to, modern marketing has changed so much year over year for the past 5, 6, 7 years, that what even you were doing 7 years ago is not what you're doing now. So there's always a level of education. Back in the day, you'd always say this as a marketer, you go, God, if I can get a quarter every time somebody gave me a piece of advice or recommendation on how to do marketing, right?
Everyone's a marketer,
right? Yeah, everybody thinks they're a marketer. And I think what is amazing is I think it's still lost on a lot of people on how complicated marketing has become. not just it's not just an ad or whatever you put out. I mean, especially in B2B marketing, it is very complex. Trying to model out your buyer's journey, understanding, what relevant touch points you want to hit them on, trying to convert that into pipeline, doing the analytics, the technology stack, everything that comes together. Marketing has gotten very complicated. But there's always education that has to happen. And so anytime that, whether it's on Mike's team or other finance teams I've worked on, I'm being introduced to somebody who is new to the company or just in general to the team, there's always a learning curve in terms of teaching the finance person the kind of the nuances in marketing. And God bless them, they're trying to learn. I love people who come to the table trying to learn. But there is learning that has to happen, right? And so I wish I could think of a real concrete example that everybody would go, oh, that's so true. But just in the way that a finance person parrots back or tries to parrot back what you've just tried to explain to them, you hear all sorts of, it's got to be black or white. There's not much gray. It's very concrete, and you have to help people just say, I'm like, it could be that black or white, but please write down this assumption. Like, I'm a big assumption person. This is the assumption I'm making.
So are finance people.
The statement I just made.
That's right. I'm laughing because what she's saying gets back to the point I was just making. It's like, we're parroting it back more black and white because in the end we have to put a number on it. And I totally feel her pain, and I think she understands the position we're in. What she's saying reminds me of something my marketing professor in school said, and yes, finance people take marketing classes. It was that marketing is easy to do, but marketing is very difficult to do well. And that's what Rashmi's saying. It's like anybody can go in and make assumptions and draw things up and fire with both guns and hope things come in, but it's really difficult to do well, and it involves using numbers and data. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I would add to that, the ultimate air cover for knowing that you're doing it well is another subject that I know that we've brushed on, which is the notion of, key performance indicators or measurement. So, I know this is a super hot topic for everyone, especially in the world that we live in. And I think especially for some of the best, those who do it best, which I think often happens to be in a SaaS world. Mike, maybe we'll start with you from a finance perspective. Mm-hmm. What are you looking for in terms of key performance indicators? What's important to you as marketing is reporting its effectiveness or desires for new budget, new campaigns, and new ideas?
Sure. So what and I was just talking to somebody who's helping us with reporting on these very topics. So when I think about marketing, I think about funnel, and I think about what we call cohort analysis. So for us, and this is a challenge for Rashmi and I right now, because we're really pointed in a very exciting but different direction than where we came from pre-COVID, which is we're focused much more on the enterprise and less on the smaller business, and we're focused much more on the indirect business or our partner business. So we're trying to figure out what are the right conversion ratios as we move down the funnel. And so that's one where we have to use what I would call industry standards until we have enough data to be able to say, okay, this seems to be the ratios that are particular to our business, right? And so, investment to generate leads to MQLs, to SQLs, to SQOs, and anybody in the marketing and sales arena will know those. Those are super important to us, because the higher the conversions, obviously, the less we have to spend for deals to come down the bottom line. And the other part of it is more on the cohort side, is more about speed, right? So I'm looking at this and saying, well, how long does it take to move through those different phases of the funnel, and what's appropriate? And Rashmi is saying to me, we can touch customers or prospects throughout that funnel. And I say, great, so let's measure that and see over time how our spending in different areas affects how fast, or how that changes how fast we work through those funnels. And then the other issue is just one at a 30,000 foot one is looking at ROI and optimizing for the mix, right? This is Rashmi is going to be the master of how she mixes and matches and channels and tactics, and we'll be looking at those to the degree we can and testing to see in what situation does 1 + 1 = 3. And
Mike,
obviously, we'll look at that.
And Mike, and I love what you're saying here. And there's cohort analysis. Let's stop there for a second. I think that's something that's super overlooked in the marketing world. And if you would, for folks that are dialed in today, could you just give us your basic, definition of what you're looking for, or what you're doing when you're looking at a cohort analysis?
Sure. Actually, cohort analysis are very common in more than just SaaS business. Actually, I came from a lending environment at one point where cohorts, or we called them vintages, is very important. And in the lending business, it's about saying, I'm going to have different policies for who I'll lend to and how much I'll lend to them. And then I issue, and under what conditions, then I issue a loan. And then we follow to see, do they pay us back and how well do they pay us back? That's a vintage. We're seeing how that matures or doesn't mature, right? But on a cohort analysis for a SaaS business, it's really about, at least from a marketing standpoint, it's about those things that I mentioned. How do we, are we not only getting people through the channel and through the funnel and getting them through efficiently? The question is, once they're on the books, are they the kind of customers we want, right? Are they ones that are going to stay and grow? Are they going to be ones that stay and just sit there and provide an annuity? Or are they ones that will churn? Because obviously your marketing return has everything to do with not only getting the deal, but how much cash flow and profit it provides you once they're on the books. So that's why I think about cohorts so distinctly in our business.
Yeah. And I would say, for when you talk about cohort analysis with a marketing lens, what's just really important is we think about things from kind of a couple areas. Where is the lead coming from? So cohort from a create date, like a time, right? So it could be timestamp based, it could be source based, and then it could be if you have different segments and segmentation you're going after, it could be segment based. So one is first defining what the cohort is. What we look at is cohort based on the parts, the stages of the funnel. So what's a lead, what's an MQL, a sales qualified lead, and sales qualified opportunity. And then we look at the timestamp. Right. So what exactly, like whenever that lead was created, right, then that's the cohort we're following. The leads within a certain time bucket is the cohort we're following. So leads that are created, let's say on April 1st, do we want to know in that how many days does it take for those leads to then move into the next stage, right, as one example. And then from that stage to the next stage and down the funnel. And then you want to also take a look at it from the point of what was the driving forces or factors that took that lead and moved it from stage to stage. How many touches did it make? Can you do the actual attribution analysis against that? How many, and I always like saying this, how many licks does it take to get to the center of the Tootsie Pop? Like if you don't know, you don't know how to figure that out, you're going to be spending either too little or too much if you don't know that. And so, and what's the flavor of the Tootsie Pop? Is it, it's the first level is like, I want to create pipeline. Fantastic. But then you should never forget about the second flavor, which is I want to generate revenue. And any marketer, and there was a revolution that was happening, I think, a few years ago. Any marketer that's not revenue obsessed, like any marketer that doesn't care not only about contribution to pipeline, but contribution to revenue, then they're behind in the times. Because you talked about, I remember, and like distinctly remember in 2015, 16 or whatnot, a lot of messaging around how can CMOs have a seat at the table. Will show how you actually are helping generate revenue for the organization, and they will push the chair out for you to sit in, right? And so that's what's really critical.
I love that. I mean, that's the whole thesis of why this organization exists, which is it can have one of the bigger seats at the table. We just got to take the opportunity. And I love the notion of pushing that seat out. Rashmi, if you, from a measurement perspective, if you could give us an insight in two categories. One is what are the 2 or 3 most important KPIs you report back to Mike and the executive team? that you are doing today? And if you had your way, you had a magic wand, what would you want to be able to report tomorrow that you're not actually reporting on today?
Well, I mean, I think so. It's interesting. I came from the data and analytics space. I kind of was born out of that. So I really understand the importance of not only just reporting and dashboarding, but what it takes underneath it. Like, what's the underlying data set that you're actually working with to then build your analysis on top of. And I think before I get into the key KPIs, I think the first thing that we're really trying to do here at Conversica is make sure we're on a very stable data foundation. And that we understand all the inputs that are needed into the data, and it's normalized, it's cleansed, it has integrity to it, because, you know, the saying goes, dirty data in, dirty data out. And so I could have the prettiest reports and dashboards, but if they're not sitting on data that we all, not just me, not just Mike, but we as an organization don't believe in, then it's for naught. And so I think right now where we're at is we've made a lot of strides, just even in the past 6 months, 7 months, to really kind of better normalize our data, clean up our data, and get it to a place where the reports that we're building off of it have more integrity to it. That being said, you know, there are some KPIs. I think I have more of a wish list of where I kind of want things to go.
And you're going to create work for me.
I love the way this is working. I love the way that Mark is pushing to finance. This is great. Sometimes it's the other way around.
This is like a one-on-one.
I won't tell Mike that. Rashmi, yeah, this is great.
Here we go. I would love to be able to show Mike on a consistent basis kind of the return on our campaign investment. I would love to be able to show kind of the buyer's journey and the attribution that's happening against that. I would love to be able to look at cohort across different cohorts, not just the one that I mentioned, which we use right now today, and it's critically important. And I'd love to dive in a little bit more into that once pipeline's created, what's happening from pipeline to close. And really getting deeper assessment into it, you know, proverbially if things take a left turn or go off the reservation, are we seeing a trend or a pattern in that? So those are the types of things. I mean, right now we set goals for every quarter of what we have to hit. And we put our spending and budget towards those goals. And we monitor it like everybody else, like through pipeline and forecast calls. We track our progress against those goals, and we have indicators of whether we're on track or not. And if we're not on track, then we have action plan to recover from that. And if we're ahead of the game, you know, nobody has yet quite complained. So that's kind of the case. You know, part of it too is trying to keep it a little simple as well. So that, to Mike's point earlier, you just don't get bogged down in data for data's sake. You're trying to solve a problem.
Yeah.
And
Mike,
go ahead, Dan.
Quick question for you, and this is going to be a strange one, but in terms of Rashmi's wish list, which I thought was unique and fairly thoughtful, very thoughtful actually. How does that make you feel? Not that who's going to do it, but as sitting there, you know, in the VP of Finance role, how do you feel when your CMO says, I want these, you know, 3 or 4 things to be able to report on?
I love it. Absolutely. Yeah. And what I would say, just to tie what she's saying to answer your question, is when you're talking about data and you want to speak the same language, I guess to torture the analogy, you need the same letters. Meaning the person who is not in this conversation that needs to be in this conversation when you're talking about data is your IT and systems person, for the reasons Rashmi mentioned. Hey, we've joined fairly recently, and Conversica has had explosive growth, and this story is not unusual to any startup who's been at it and grown rapidly. It's the rare startup, and your listeners will know this, that where you arrive at the size we are, that the systems are just locked down and the data is clean and everything's just easy to just jump right into. So and she's acknowledging that, and so am I. I love it. I actually feel guilty, and she'll tell you I do feel guilty, that she wants all of that stuff. And I say, I want it for you. I just don't want to make sure that when I give it to you, it's accurate and we build the systems and the foundation correctly. So that's what I'm hip deep in with her. And I love her requests. Like I said, as long as it's not information for information's sake and there's a reason why we're looking at it, I'm all for it.
Yeah, no, that whole dialogue right there was golden. I mean, there's so many things to pull out of it, but I'll just summarize it like this. Rashmi has a wish list of things that she wants to report on that will drive the business forward, so much so that, the VP of finance loves it, right? Like, and I know in marketing, we're in the business of emotions and communication, right? We can't forget that as we're looking to, get the resources and budget we need to do bigger and better things. And we need to create that type of energy and momentum around, other functions within the business. And it sounds like you guys just have such a great rapport and trust, which is fantastic and amazing. I know we're getting to the top of the hour here, and I'd love to pivot into kind of the last subject, which is one of my favorites. I'm a former finance guy, now marketer. I started out in finance, but it's the world of predictions, right? I'm a recovering finance person. That's right. And that's the world of predictions, right? And you said it so well, Mike. You can't put a range in budgets. You got to put a number down. So the first prediction I'd love from both of you is, number one, in this COVID world, post-COVID, what do you want to call it? Like, we're still in the moment, like cases are spiking. We still are seeing things being opened up and shut down. And I don't think we're out of the woods yet. What is the one or two things that folks aren't paying enough attention to that you predict that we should be paying attention to right now as it relates to your business or your function within marketing or finance, where you keep looking at this and saying, man, people are missing this. And I within Conversica are going to stay on top of it.
Yeah. Okay. So I think from my view is I'm not predicting a rapid recovery, and I'm not predicting Armageddon. I'm predicting kind of a limping along. So many people want to talk about one or the other. I'm saying the economy in general, I think, will have stops and starts over the next year until there's a clear path for a way for people to interact without concern for their health. And so what
will that do to your business, Mike? What in terms of that prediction? Everyone loves to put it into shape. W, B, U, bathtub, whatever you want to call it. What does that mean to Conversica or other
what kind of a recession?
Well,
I think that our strategic direction is absolutely going to benefit from the changes we made. Will benefit from the new world. Like I said, I don't think things are going to be easy, but I don't think they're going to be super difficult. And I'll let Rashmi talk about how our products will help other customers through a similar time period. But I think from my perspective is I'm watching our customers. I'm watching how they're paying us. I'm watching how renewal conversations are going. And I want to make sure that we are investing when we see the green shoots of growth, whether it's in our target markets or if it's in the economy in general. And my goal is to make sure that we don't get ahead of ourselves while we're growing, which is probably something every finance person is thinking about. But I think that there's a whole different potential dynamic of how things start, stop, grow, ebb, and that we need to be very aware of that.
Fantastic. Right.
Yeah. So, look, I think the world twice over has felt the immense toll that COVID-19 has taken on our lives and on our economy. And I think we're just getting started. I think in the business world specifically, the next 12 months, organizations will experience an economic roller coaster of highs and lows, right? We're seeing it in the stock market today. Really, the question comes around how quickly as an organization can you adjust will determine its ability to actually not only survive this time, but ultimately the thing that we're talking about is recover and thrive. And there is a new normal, no doubt about it, right? There's a new operating model. And it's really interesting too, because you hear a lot, what you're hearing a lot in the market with companies are, now that everything is digital, you can't be face to face. How you conduct business has to be online, right? It's more important now than ever. Wherever you were as an organization on your digital transformation journey when this pandemic hit is what you're relying upon to help you survive. But as we start coming out of survival mode and into recovery period, no matter how slow or staid or whatever it might be, we have to be prepared for what that future will hold. And I think now is a time where organizations really need to evaluate their strategies along with their digital transformation initiatives to see if those initiatives are going to meet the challenge. I submit that this new normal needs to have a new reflection on those types of digital transformation investments that you need to make. No longer can, let's say, sales teams rely solely on human capital to drive the productivity and performance. They need things like intelligent automation solutions, like intelligent virtual assistants like we provide at Conversica to help augment their teams to drive more pipeline and ultimately more revenue. Even in marketers, like marketing leaders, you know, every dollar I spend, believe you me, is getting highly scrutinized by finance, right? And I'm not alone on this. All of my peers are saying the exact same thing. So every dollar I invest, I've got to show a return on that spend, right? And then if you think about throughout the organization and our customers in general, our customers is the power line to every organization, right? They're the energy source. So if you cannot put forth the effort to actually retain the customers you have, right, then you're going to be further jeopardizing your company's ability to recover and will be slow. So post customer retention and growth is imperative. And this is one of, we submit that having something like an augmented workforce powered by intelligent virtual assistants can really help because that outreach is digital. It has to be done at scale, and it has to still be done with a high level of personalization that drives towards the right business outcomes. And so this is where I think organizations are looking at. They're thinking about intelligent automation. They're thinking about ways like, shoot, I just can't go hire 20 people tomorrow. As much as I'd love to, I cannot be able to do that, but I'm still being asked to deliver on those KPIs, to deliver on those business goals. How am I going to do it with what I've got? You need help. You need technology.
Yeah, no, that is so crisply and cleanly said, Rashmi. I feel like maybe you had a past life in politics or something. That was great. No, really, that was fantastic. And there's a lot to unpack there. Unfortunately, we've got only a handful of minutes left. Now I'm going to flip it. I'm going to say, what prediction would the two of you have that you have seen in the market today that's overblown, that is just overdone, and you would walk someone back from an ledge, whether it be someone on the board or a customer? What are folks over predicting, if that's a word?
Well, I think that I would stress that, and just build on what Rashmi said, and this is something in finance that we are looking at very closely, and she highlighted it. You always think retaining a customer is going to be a lot cheaper than going to get a new customer, right? And I think that's I wouldn't say common knowledge, but that's generally accepted, right? But in the era of COVID, it's just magnified because we can't know with the stops and starts, as she was saying, how fast you're going to be able to add to it. So I think a lot of people are thinking, and you can certainly see in the behavior of a lot of people who are literally itching to get back into the world, that people have this sense that everything's going to go back to normal, and we're, by Labor Day, we'll be chugging along like nothing happened. And I think that's, to my earlier comments, I don't think that is going to happen. And that's why I think that we need to be much more open-minded as a finance team about how much money we spend or how much revenue we forego to keep our customers loyal to us and with our service. The good news is our product is built so that we see, as well as they see, what value it's generating for them. So that makes the conversations much easier. But for me, it's about, are we allowing customers to pause? Because our customers are the New York Yankees, and the Yankee baseball season has been delayed, right? Or we have customers who want to stay with us, but we have offered them a little bit lower rate as a courtesy and to help them through these tough times. These are things as you might think a finance guy would be sitting in the corner going nuts about, but you have to look at the bigger picture and say, I would much rather be holding on to these customers and show them that we're true partners than trying to go out and replace them.
Great.
So.
Yeah, it's tough because I don't know if anybody has over predicted something. I think because of the volatility of where everything is at, it's just simply hard to predict. And so what I do know is what I do believe is true is that, I mean, people's deep desires to not just stay where they are, and that's kind of both personally, I think literally, because we're having to stay shelter in place, and even though things are reopening, we're still, unfortunately, we're going to see spikes in how many cases are getting confirmed. People are talking about a wave 2, a phase 2. People say we're only in the second inning, entering the third inning. Like this is a long ball game. Whatever analogy and metaphor you want to use. I think the thing that you have to check is, at the very least, you really have to be able to measure what is working, but where maybe you would have measured something over the course of a quarter, you're now measuring stuff in a matter of weeks. And you're seeing, can I read the tea leaves? And I know tea leaves to finance is like, oh my God, like a migraine headache. Cause they're so, they're painful to deal with, but part of my job is to figure out where the tea leaves are going. Where is the wind chiming, right? Where the wind chimes, like where's the wind coming from? And what direction is it heading in? And let's make sure we're on that path. I think though, also there's something to be stated for that. And I know this doesn't totally answer your question, but I don't know if I have a good answer to your specific question, but I do think what's important is you got to stay the course on your strategy. Like if it's based off of solid business foundation, and it's based off of just kind of a solid understanding of your business, where it's supposed to go and where it's going to go, like stay the course on your strategy. You could do micro pivots to kind of get over the certain kind of what I would consider this as being short-term hurdles, but stay the course on your strategy. And so I think it's easy as leaders, whether you're a marketing and finance leader, CEO, whatever, I think it's easy as leaders sometimes to feel like you've got to do a lot of, pivots back and forth. But if you can just stay that course and make sure that you're adapting where you need to, but staying true to yourself where you need to, I think that's going to help you at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, I think that's so true, and even more true in today's world. Well, Rashmi and Mike, this has been fun and insightful, and I truly appreciate the time you've taken today, and I've really enjoyed this. Thank you.
Likewise, Pat. Thank you. Thanks. We've had a good time.